Hi, everyone. I'm Rena Ninen. Thank you for joining us. The first big vote on impeachment proceedings against President Trump passed in the House today.
On this vote, the yeas are 232. The nays are 196. The resolution is adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
Lawmakers voted mostly along party lines to establish rules and procedures for the next phase of the inquiry. No Republicans voted for it, and 2 Democrats voted against. The White House reacted earlier in a statement. It wrote, in part, "The president has done nothing wrong, and the Democrats know it. Speaker Pelosi and the Democrats have done nothing more than enshrine unacceptable violations of due process into House rules." The statement goes on to read, "The Democrats want to render a verdict without giving the administration a chance to mount a defense. That's unfair, unconstitutional, and fundamentally un-American." Well, this all comes as impeachment depositions continue. Today, committees are hearing from Tim Morrison. He's a White House national security official who listened to the president's Ukraine call. He resigned yesterday. We have CBS News chief congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes on Capitol Hill, CBS News White House correspondent Ben Tracy at the White House, of course, and CBSN political contributor Molly Hooper, who joins us from our Washington bureau. Nancy, so walk us through this. What really has been lined out with this resolution, and what do Democrats have now when it comes to the impeachment inquiry?
Well, it passed as we expected along party lines, and so now Democrats say that they have laid out a procedure for the upcoming public phase of this impeachment inquiry. However, they couldn't answer many of our questions about it a short time ago. For example, when will that public phase start? How many individuals are you planning to ask to come in for public hearings? And on and on. They say that they're still trying to determine those details. They have to wait and see what happens with this last batch of depositions that they are planning to conduct next week and possibly thereafter before they can answer specifics like that. Beyond that, I asked the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, what he means when he says that he can impose remedies if the president appears to be unlawfully blocking witnesses from coming forward. What kinds of remedies was he talking about there? This is something that has distressed the White House and Republicans here on Capitol Hill alike. Chairman Nadler said that it was entirely appropriate to react if the president is trying to obstruct the investigation in any way, but he didn't say exactly what kinds of punishments he is considering. So still a lot of gaps to be filled in here, Rena, even as we recognize that this is a significant step in the impeachment process.
Molly, as you hear Nancy saying, this is really a significant step, but you look at the voting here. No Republicans voted for it. Only 2 Democrats voted in favor. You impeach in the House, you remove in the Senate. What does this say to us as we look further down the road here, Molly?
Well, here's what it says to Republicans, and it's one thing that they did say today in their press conference following this vote. The only bipartisan vote that happened today came against moving forward with this impeachment resolution. I think that that's a talking point that we will hear by the president, Senate Republicans, and House Republicans. Perhaps Senate Republicans less so, but House Republicans most definitely will be pushing that point. And again, really, Republicans have been pushing for open hearings and to read these depositions by former White House, current and former White House officials. And now perhaps it looks like they'll get their chance to do so. But again, when it comes to the timing, that's a bit unclear.
And Ben, when you talk about this, do we know at all if the president was watching this go down, and how's the White House responding?
Yeah, I'm told that the president did watch the vote this morning from the White House residence, and just seconds after that vote was taken, the president took to his preferred communication platform of Twitter, and he tweeted out, "The greatest witch hunt in American history." And so far, that really has been the president's official response to this vote. The White House did put out a statement. White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham said the president has done nothing wrong. She goes on to say the Democrats are choosing every day to waste time on a sham impeachment, a blatantly partisan attempt to destroy destroy the president. And in there, you're getting a little bit of a preview of how the White House might respond to this now, saying, look, the Democrats are wasting time. We really want to focus on issues that matter to the American people, and they're focusing on impeachment. This is the outcome that the White House did expect today in terms of this vote, so nobody here was particularly surprised.
And Nancy, when you look at this vote, you know, the two Democrats who broke rank here, one of the districts was won by President Trump by something like 30 points and won in the last election. When you look at this, how are House Republicans looking forward with their strategy in dealing with this inquiry?
Well, they're going to continue to rail against the process. We saw that from Republican leaders during the vote and after the vote. They say that this is monstrously unfair. They say that the Democrats are essentially giving them fake rights in this process. They say that it amounts to telling the minority that you have your First Amendment rights, but only if you say things that we agree with. So Republicans are going to continue to argue that this process is illegitimate, while Democrats say that the minority is getting the exact same rights that it has gotten in previous impeachment proceedings for President Clinton and for former President Nixon. I should tell you, Rena, that we do have some pretty remarkable breaking news coming out of a deposition that's taking place in the basement of the Capitol right now. This is the deposition highly anticipated of Tim Morrison. He is the top Russia aide to the president, and his testimony had been highly anticipated because he really had a bird's eye view of what was going on, even as the White House announces that he is now going to be leaving his post. My colleague Arden Farhi was able to obtain his remarks, his opening statement to the committee, and intriguingly, he is basically agreeing with everything that, almost everything that Ambassador Bill Taylor said in his blockbuster testimony last week about how they discovered that this pressure campaign on the Ukrainians to get them to try to investigate Joe Biden went down. This is notable coming from someone who, unlike Bill Taylor, who's a lifelong nonpartisan career Foreign Service officer, Morrison is viewed as someone who was likely to be much more loyal to the president, but he agreed with Bill Taylor in almost every regard. Interestingly, he said that he listened in on the president's phone call with the president of Ukraine back in July, where the president told the president of Ukraine, hey, I'd really like you to look into Joe Biden and Burisma, the company that employed Biden's son. After that phone call, Morrison said that he, too, like others have testified, went to National Security Council lawyers because he was so concerned. Not, Morrison says, because he thought that the president had done anything illegal, but because he felt that if this conversation leaked, it would look bad for the president, and it would look bad to Democrats, he said, it would look bad to the Ukrainians. And so his main concern, he says, is the optics of this call if it were ever to get out. And we know now that what happened next was that the top lawyer at the National Security Council basically turned around and placed the summary of that call in a highly classified server, very unusual for a call like this, precisely, sources say, because they didn't want the text to get out.
But hearing Nancy describe this testimony and what we're getting right now, breaking news at this point, how do you think the White House is going to respond? How concerned are they? Because these testimonies are just continuing.
I think they're concerned when you have people now who have been in the room for these very serious conversations. You're talking about somebody who's a high-ranking official of the National Security Council, and they're staring down the barrel of another gun where Congress has now asked for John Bolton, the former National Security Advisor, to testify. He has said that he won't do that unless he's subpoenaed, and the Democrats are all but certain to subpoena him. And then there are some concerns if he comes in there, because he did not leave the White House on good terms. People may remember when he left here, the president all but said, I fired him. But John Bolton would have been in the room for all these conversations about Russia policy, about Ukraine policy, and a lot of different things. So now you have the White House looking at not just people that it can dismiss as, I don't know who this person is, why are they saying this about this perfect phone call I had? The president can't say he doesn't know who Tim Morrison is. He can't say he doesn't know who John Bolton is. So they're going to have to kind of take this up on the substance grounds versus the real process grounds that so far they've been arguing.
Molly, when you hear about all this testimony that people are patching together, what are lawmakers on Capitol Hill? What more do they want to know? What do they feel will strengthen this impeachment inquiry for them?
I think it really depends on which side you're talking to, because even listening to what Tim Morrison said, reportedly, Republicans will pick up on the fact that Tim Morrison said it wasn't illegal. It was not illegal. He just thought the optics would look bad. So then the Republicans will say, well, what did the president do? What did he do that was illegal? Did somebody go to the president and ask him, should we hide this? If the president wasn't involved, he's not involved in this. Democrats, however, will seize on the fact that it was something wrong to do, and that people as high-ranking as Tim Morrison knew that it was wrong, or at least perceived that it was wrong, and tried to hide it. So I think that, again, when we move forward and get into these open hearings, whenever that time is, I think that the fact that this resolution does allow for both sides to have 45 minutes at the top of the hearings for essentially unfettered questioning of the witness before you get to the so-called dog and pony shows, Anne Marie said last hour, of the other members asking 5-minute questions, that will really set the tone for these hearings going forward. And I think that both sides will be able to pick and choose, and what they do already, from what is said from these witnesses, but at least the public will get to see and make their own decisions.
And Nancy, this vote today, it's not a vote for impeachment. So can you walk us through what really happens next?
Well, that's correct. This is merely a vote to sort of lay out some procedures, as Molly was just describing, that are going to govern the next public phase of this impeachment inquiry. So it looks like we're going to have at least another week of depositions. They're very much hoping that John Bolton will come in and sit for a deposition. They've asked for several others, including that NSC lawyer who took the call summary and had it placed in the secure server. It'll be interesting to see if he ends up showing up. And then at some point, we assume mid-November, but again, Democratic leaders have been very cautious about the details here. No one is willing to get locked in on a date here, but we assume likely in mid-November is when we might start seeing some public hearings being held by the House Intelligence Committee, which is really the committee that has taken the lead on this investigation up to this point. And the names that I've heard bandied about most when you ask, well, who do you think might be called in to appear at these public hearings? Who do you most want to hear from? The names I hear the most are people who we've seen already come in for private depositions, but who Democratic lawmakers believe were candid, compelling, will help them make the case to the American public that there was wrongdoing here that the president should be punished for. We're talking about Lieutenant Colonel Alex Vindman, who just testified this week, who was a top aide to the president, said he heard the phone call and then went immediately to the NSC's top lawyer because he thought that it was improper. You've got Ambassador Bill Taylor, who's the top diplomat in Ukraine. Blockbuster testimony last week really just laid out the pressure campaign from his view, involving the president's personal lawyer, his ambassador to the European Union, his secretary of energy, and on and on. And then Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, who was the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, who was suddenly recalled earlier this year. She was given no other reason than the fact that the president had lost confidence in her. But we know from Rudy Giuliani's cable news appearances and from other sources that Giuliani was convinced that she was blocking his ability to get the Ukrainians to investigate the Bidens. So that's sort of the initial cast of characters that we might expect to hear from if they all agree to do it.
All right, Nancy Cortez, Ben Tracy, and Molly Hooper. I want to thank all three of you for joining us.